This is actually the 30th anniversary of the IFPRI Egypt seminar. This is the 30th, and the second with UNDP. So something to celebrate. So I would also like to thank USAID for funding the seminar series. And of course, all our teams, Rwanda, who have put so much effort into it, IFPRI team and UNDP teams. And I'm sure you will be in good hands with Rwanda as the moderator today. Without further ado, I'll give this back to Rwanda with a big shukran again.
Okay, let's dive right into our issue. We will give the floor to Jao Ku from IFPRI, Washington, D.C. Are you online?
Yes, I am.
Oh.
Okay.
Please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay, so is my presentation on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very glad to be able to. Different types of data in CGR's agricultural research and development activities. So I've been in touch with many of our researchers in this area. So I've been thinking a lot about this topic, and I will just give some examples of what our colleagues have been working on along this topic. My title slide is showing this network of node and like kind of graph. And what we are seeing is the network analysis of SDGs. There are 17 SDGs, as we all know, and there are many indicators and targets. But the key message here is that everything are quite well linked. So this is not really isolated indicators per se. This is a network of indicators, and so we have to approach in a little bit of systems level and system thinking. So many things can be linked, and many things are kind of dependent on each other. So that provide either both challenges and also opportunities. So that's where we are kind of coming from, we are heading to. So next slide, please. So when we are saying big data, so this is not really just about the size of data. So there are many types of new data or existing data being used in new kind of ways. And there are many different definitions and different type of characteristics of big data out there. Here, I just simply characterize big data as a digitally collected streams of data. And these are all mostly passively collected. So mobile phone data and financial transactions, social media, crowdsourcing, physical sensors, like there are things called Internet of Things that people are collecting data in the field with 24 hours, 7 days a week, just continuously collecting data from different sensors. And remote sensing, without us knowing, there are lots of constellation of satellites outer space keep sensing and taking pictures and collecting data on Earth and what we are doing in the planet. So yeah, all this kind of data can give us kind of proxy measurement or proxy indication of how things are and where we are heading and how things are going. So of course, this kind of new data are not really easy to be analyzed using conventional and traditional way of data analysis. So as more and more new data streams becoming available, also there are many new research methodologies and analysis techniques are being developed, and we call it just collectively data science techniques. And these are really good at finding patterns from large data sets using AI and machine learning, different types of algorithms. The key point here is really on the finding patterns. Again, many of these data sets are proxy. So we are not really asking people or measuring people's data one by one directly. But these kind of patterns can give us good idea on where things are changing and how much variances are detected, and so that we can get into more understanding of why these are happening, and yeah, we can correlate and complement with other types of data we have. So that's kind of a quick overview. Next slide, please. So yeah, again, as we all know, SDG has 17 goals, 169 targets, and 232 indicators. Yeah, it's again a lot of overlaps and interlinked indicators, but still there are lots of indicators that requires a measurement. There are tier 1, 2, and 3 kind of different types of different stages of those indicators, depending on how ready we are to be able to measure directly, and also being measured by at least 50% of countries. That kind of threshold level set in this tier system. And yeah, we're not quite there yet. If you look at SDG 1, so there are out of 14 indicators, only 3 of them are in tier 1. And SDG 2 is a little bit better, but about 60%, 62% of indicators are in tier 1. So there are still lots of methodologies and standards still not yet available. So there are many research opportunities, and there are many pilots being developed, and a lot of international collaborations are going on. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick update. I mean, it's very I'm not going into detail, of course, but this is being kept updated, this tier by tier and indicator by indicator kind of status, kind of dashboards. So the latest update from UNSDG was last week, actually 20th of November, showing where we are on each of these indicators in terms of tiers. If you are going into details, there are many notes added here, and some of them are still being defined, and we need, for example, smallholders. Definition of smallholders are still being developed. So I mean, a lot of active conversation and research R&D are still going on. Next slide, please. So from here, I will present a little bit of kind of examples that might be able to help in this discussion. Again, moving from tier 3 to tier 1 requires a lot of research and kind of validation and verification on the ground. And these are not being done and not to be done by one single unit or institute. I mean, there are a lot of country level collaboration are also necessary. So I will give some quick examples of what look like, what seem to be quite promising approaches, but of course, these are not really meant to be the solution. Like for example, this first one is a very seminal paper from Stanford University, published in 2016. First of, I think, its kind, trying to use satellite imagery and machine learning algorithm to predict poverty. There were similar approaches in the past, but this 2016 paper were trying to identify features, like, for example, township and the road network and different types of objects within the satellite imagery, and correlated that with known kind of consumption pattern on the ground, and try to extrapolate across the large area. So if you see on the left-hand side, there are kind of correlation scatter chart showing estimated and observed consumption pattern. And I mean, there are quite, in terms of R square, you might say this is not quite ready. And if you go to next slide, or just click on the slide, you will see this quote I got from Center for Global Development. The researcher reviewed this paper, basically evaluated that, yes, this is probably good enough for academic purposes or research like this, but probably not accurate enough for policy purposes. A lot of R square is still around 0.5 or even less than 0.5. So this is, as a first cut or complementary data, this could be interesting approach, but again, this itself is not going to be really solve problem of the poverty measurement. But as a promising technology approach, I think this still has a merit to go further develop. Okay, next slide, please. So next slide is showing nighttime light and human development. Again, nighttime light is not a new data. It's been being measured decades, for more than decades. So whenever satellite pass by, sometimes it's a daylight, so they can take picture. Sometimes it's a nighttime, so all they can see is just night light, the different patterns of the light on the ground. And yeah, we soon realize those patterns are quite closely related to human development, development kind of indicators on the ground. So, for example, this paper is looking at different types of indicator, the school attendance, the infant mortality, and birth assistance. These are just quick snapshot of the paper, and this paper went into further detail about many different types of indicator. So basically, using nighttime light as a kind of good proxy for any types of development, also as well as access under SDG 1, one of the indicators is proportional population living in household with access to basic services. So this could be one, again, a complementary proxy indicator for this kind of development status and also access to services. Next slide, please. Last year, this year, IFPRI published 2 papers also using nighttime light, but also looking at a little bit different types of SDG2 related indicators. And this time it was for nutrition indicators in Nigeria. And there, again, the 2 papers came out from this study. And this is quite interesting on that not only nighttime light and development kind of indicator proxy can show where people are and how where those human beings are being kind of on the ground. But this can also give you the ideas on the quality of their lives. So, for example, when researchers correlated this nighttime light with many different types of nutrition indicators extracted from the demographic and health survey data. So they were able to see the nighttime light correlate closely with stunting and undernourishment, and also malnutrition. For example, obese on the ground. And in terms of obese, it was also quite interesting that there was a gendered effect. So the obesity for women seems to be more kind of prevalent when nighttime light intensity is high, for example. There's still a lot more research and nuances need to be kind of peeled off of and further investigated from this kind of correlation-based research. But again, as a complementary measure, this could be also a good proxy indicator that that can be investigated further. So it was interesting way of using nighttime light in a little bit different kind of lens. Next slide, please. And for SDG2, of course, the productivity, the land productivity, labor productivity is a big issue. And there are many very active research going on in satellite-based crop yield measurement. And the latest in this area is, again, being led by Stanford University. And this working paper came out, I think, last year or early this year. And they used many high-resolution satellite data from Sentinel-2, one of the satellites from European Space Agency, and tried to look at the crop yield estimation for maize and maize rotation with legume system in Uganda. So this is a basis of where state of the art is, and it's not really quite there yet. So a little bit disappointingly. So what you see on the left-hand side is that, again, the R-square is about 0.5 when you have full plot calibrated. So that's the first small graph on the left-hand side corner, meaning when we have full plot crop cut measurement in the field, then when we can develop kind of a regression model with that data, with satellite data, we have R-square of about 0.55. So it's not quite there, and there are many reasons why it's not performing as much well as like in the developed country. There are lots of heterogeneity on crop management practices, and there are many intercropping going on. So in the second row, the bottom row of chart on the left-hand side, you can see when legume intercropping is going on, or intercropping between maize and cassava going on, those R squares degrade. And it's quite challenging system really to use satellite data alone to estimate yield. Again, this is just very actively developed area, actively also investigated area in remote sensing and satellite, also observation community. So we are still quite hopeful, and a lot of CGI researchers are also participating in this kind of research. But yeah, again, the key message, we are not quite there yet, but there are promises or promising results being quite actively generated. Okay, the next slide, please. And yeah, another lot of data and pilots are being developed is in the area of crowdsourcing. Not everything can be measured by remote sensing and sensors. Sometimes we have to rely on people, but not just on the traditional way of collecting data through enumerators. So we can ask crowd, basically kind of volunteers on the ground to collect, submit data, and contribute data. So this is also new activity started, I think, around last year or early this year, the pretty latest development in this area for food price. So SDG 2 include one of the indicator food price anomalies. And yeah, so probably the best way to collect such data on the ground will be through the network of volunteers. So this is being tested in Nigeria for both retail price and also farm gate price. There are like 20,000 and in this, on the left-hand side, you can see about 20,000 volunteers submitted, and the price point showing temporal trend of different kind of crops in this region, Kano area in Nigeria. So as a methodology, this is also quite promising, but in practice, how much representative this will be in terms of country level SDG indicator. I mean, there are still more research need to be done, but yeah, again, the crowdsourcing is certainly one of the techniques people are looking into more and more for collecting data where sensors are not quite reaching or infrastructure is not quite there yet, but we can still get very valuable this kind of data. And also this kind of data can provide a very important calibration and validation point. When we just use satellite data, then there are lots of extrapolation going on. So this kind of ground truth and ground measure data can provide the quality of the satellite-based measurement or large-scale big data estimation. So these are still quite useful area to keep looking at. So yeah, that was my quick just few examples that I was hoping to just provide. And yeah, this graph, this poster is from UN Pulse Lab, published in 2017, just looking at SDG by goal, what is kind of flagship activity going on data science and analytics. And yeah, you can probably see what I presented are not quite captured here, so except the food price, but there are lots of things going on. Even between 2017 and 19, there are tremendous data, new data set becoming available and new kind of techniques available. So yeah, I think we are in quite exciting period of more data becoming available than we can possibly analyze. But yeah, I mean, there are international effort and also countries being actively participated in this kind of activities will really help us move forward. Utilizing and encompassing, embracing big data techniques in SDG measurement. So yeah, I will leave it for here, and I will come back for more question and answer and FAQ later. Okay, thank you.
Okay, everyone. Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much. That was indeed very interesting. I myself picked up quite a few elements of new forms of data, from crowdsourcing to imagery to, what was the first one? Somebody remind me. A nightlife. That's extremely interesting. The correlation between, and it does actually bring back to someone like me who's used to the old ways, the link between cause and effect, externalities, and effect of one form of poverty on others. Since Zhao is connecting with us from Washington, and we're always afraid of a technology crash, I will open the floor for questions right now before we proceed to the next presentation.
Sure.
No one?
Hello, this is Ahmad Saeddin from FAO. Hello, Joe. So I just have a clarification question. I mean, something, I missed something in the, because you mentioned something like it's interesting, big data is interesting for academia, but not so for policy. So could you elaborate a little bit on this?
Yes.
And
yes.
Then what, I mean, if it's the case, why, I mean, like now, I mean, I've heard many people saying that it's relevant for policy. So, I mean, just
Sure.
think.
Yes. Okay. So that comment, I don't know if it was shown when I was speaking. So if you can help me go back to slide number 5. So yeah, when I was talking about this poverty measurement from space, this is a paper, again, the seminal paper from Stanford University, published in 2016. When the paper came out first, there were lots of excitement of we can make a breakthrough through this kind of approaches. But yeah, if you look at the left-hand side, it's not quite there yet. So there are certainly a pattern, but it's a questionable, it's a debatable that whether this kind of relationship, correlation per se, is good enough for policy formulation or even targeting purpose using research and investment. So there are more research need to be done. Yeah, I'm not saying this is not useful. This is certainly useful, but the more academic research need to be done before really deployed as a policy tool and policy the development used in policy making directly. So there are a lot of kind of noises in the data, and that we don't capture very well. We don't understand very well. So yeah, I mean, depending on the approaches, I mean, I think the same applies for all satellite based indicators. We don't have full confidence, and so I mean, so it may be a bit too pessimistic, but yeah, what I was going to say is that we just need more work need to be done here, and at least this needs to be used in complementary measure together with other types of data and existing statistics. I don't think we are there yet to completely replace statistics data using this kind of satellite measure data. This kind of satellite measure data can give you, good ideas on where things are changing so that we can detect patterns. So for example, if we make this kind of measurement over and over again for a long period of time, we can probably have very precise measure of when things change. But we are not probably there yet to fully understand, just using this kind of data to understand why they are changing.
Great, thank you.
This needs to be complemented with other types of measures.
Great, thank you, Zhao. And just a note from me, researchers are generally very cautious people. So that's why it's always good to put a note of caution, but I can see there's a lot of progress being made. But so Zhao, and also maybe for the colleagues from UN, I also have a question. So the private sector sits on huge amounts of data that could be tremendously useful for all of these exercises. And I'm just naming telecommunication companies. They know how many phone calls from where to where. I'm saying Facebook, I'm saying Twitter, all these massive amounts of data about people, about their behavior. And while we always have to be cautious about data privacy, even if those data was anonymized, I think it could be unbelievably valuable. Now, my question is, as the CGIAR, IFPRI, and the United Nations, have we actively engaged with the Silicon Valley kind of folks to see how we can potentially mine some of those data for the course of development and better measurement.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the question. So yeah, I will just briefly share the experience from CGIAR side, but I think UN agencies might have different access. So it is true that there are lots of potential for mining new insight from this kind of core detail record. Yeah, we call it CDR, core detail record, give kind of metadata of all this call being made from cell phones. And there are good research out there also utilizing this data. It's not super easy to access this data. So even with after being anonymized, so what we have been doing is we kind of are going through intermediary who has access to this data to partner with those intermediaries to be able to analyze those data a little bit indirectly. Yeah, as Clemens, you rightly said, there are lots of cautions or privacy and ethical issues around how we can really safeguard the identity of those people who make those calls. Even if we don't see the name, there are also research out there. If you know at least like 3 or 4 different types of metadata, you can probably identify who is making those calls with kind of triangulate different kind of indicator. So, and computer science and the machine learning techniques are getting smarter and smarter, and people are also kind of reverse engineering those anonymization to de-anonymize where this is coming from. So yeah, I mean, it's not super easy and it's not really an open domain, but yeah, I mean, there are partnerships that are being made to look more into this. There are also very exciting research came out a few years ago using this core detail record to detect gender, predict the gender of the person who made a call. And yeah, again, there are lots of assumptions and it's basically correlation analysis. But yeah, that itself was quite also interesting. Opening up new opportunities for gender researchers. So yeah, I know colleagues at IPRI also looking into this and trying to utilize this data as a component in gender research and kind of gender indicators in other types of analysis.
Thank you, Joe. I'm going to take 2 more questions. Okay, I'm going to take 1 more question and a comment, and please wait before you answer so that we get more questions together for you to think about. Any other speaker before we move on to the next session? Okay. Doctor?
No.
Just I want to comment on this very interesting presentation on the data, big data, using big data in tracing the SDGs. In this respect, I just want to mention that in Egypt we are preparing something called the Unified Data Registry, where every individual has about 100 indicators for to trace their poverty levels, their whatever social and economic situation is. And so I think it is very great, it will be very great to combine this kind of big data on the light satellite pictures and so on with this unified data registry, so we can have a clearer picture on the poverty and other SDGs at the individual level or at the household level. I think it's it will be very useful to combine both of these.
If I may ask a question as well. When you're using, in the past there was security in the data in the sense that it was a very, it had a very, very precise methodology. It was not just a collection of information. And it was analyzed, it was double-checked for accuracy, for reliability, and all those tests, and for margins of error. And therefore, it became, we're going to go into another presentation on that approach of looking at data and analyzing it. In terms of big data, and especially in light of the fact that it has become a public issue, whether it's on the in the moral sense, or in terms of privacy, or in terms of rights, or either. Is there anything happening with the use of big data, not only in terms of anonymity, but in terms of accuracy and reliability? Are there any form of checks and balance on the representational value of these data?
Okay. Yeah. Should I wait for more questions?
I don't see any. Please go ahead.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, so thanks for the question. So first comment on unified data registry. That sounds really exciting opportunity, and also, so I'd love to learn more about it. But this is precisely the kind of data can really help the community move forward. And yeah, I'd love to learn more about it and see how we can collaborate potentially together to really add value to this kind of data. That sounds really exciting. For the precise methodology we used to have from statistics and moving forward with this big data kind of thing. Yeah, so that's a really issue. And yeah, as you see from actually most of my slides, there are very mixed messages. There are new approaches being tested, new sources of data are becoming available. Although at the same time, the error bars are not as reliable as you hope to be. And so there are methodologies exist to test how precise you are, how accurate you are in terms of estimation, and how much representative your estimates are in large areas. And there are error metrics, and there are actual cross-validation methods. There are techniques exist. But again, that's a really good point and very important issue. Another really important issue here is the biases in the data. So not everywhere everything can be measured, and that produce bias to the machine, and unknown to the machine algorithm, we are introducing biases. Like for example, one of the slides I showed the crop yield measurement, how messy, how erroneous that estimate could be in terms of, especially in intercrop and very complex cropping systems. And yeah, if you ignore them and if that's not really taken into account, then yeah, the crop yields are often quite overestimated just because we don't fully understand what kind of cropping system we have. And it's the same for all these areas. So yes, so that's certainly the very important topic. I don't have good answer how we can really introduce very robust check and balances. But yeah, I mean, that's why there are more research needs to be done, more data needs to be shared, and more eyes and boots on the ground really needs to be incorporated to work together. So yeah, I mean, I certainly agree, and yeah, more needs to be done on that, the accuracy measurement. So sometimes we get a little bit mystified about this big data and the satellite imagery, but yeah, of course, that's not the whole story. So this accuracy measurement and how we can improve it, how we can really make it good enough to be able to use in policy making, that's really where our international development community's discussion should be.
Thank you very much, Zhao. Thank you for joining us from Washington, D.C. It's very interesting, and I think everybody here will actually probably go back and look more into some of these. I know I go and I start to Google different things, and I learn a lot more about the big data and the methodologies and what they're trying to say. We will now move to the next discussion, and it is from Nasma Mamdouh Amir, statistician at CAPMAS, the Central Agency for Public Mobilization and Statistics, a little bit more into the traditional methodologies of using data and the recent research that have been done. I think there's been a lot of interesting research done lately, especially the one on poverty, which actually updated the poverty levels in Egypt, and also in terms of a new tool that CAPMAS is introducing to help everyone actually mine some of this data and maneuver with it and get more analysis out of it. Over to you, Nasma.
Thank you. I would like to thank you all. Today I will speak about HYECS data measuring SDGs indicators, especially the SDG 1 and 2, for better policies. But at first, I want to mention that this presentation is under supervision of Dr. Heba Lacy, and I would like to thank her so much for her cooperation. Let's start by the contents. I will start by brief introduction, and I will speak briefly about the household income expenditure and consumption survey, HYECS survey, and I will speak about food security data. The third one will be the snapshot of the results from HYECS 2017-18 and snapshots of food security indicators 2015. Let's start by the introduction. Sit or
not moving?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Doesn't work. Okay. As we all know, poverty and malnutrition are the most important factors that have a negative impact on society. And as we all know, there is a link between poverty and malnutrition because healthy children become healthy adults, and healthy adults can increase their productivity and their ability to get out poverty circle. Hence, the role of country come, such as the ministries, civil societies, organizations are interested in this are interested in these issues that facing the society, such as malnutrition and poverty. And since CAPMAS is the main source of data in Egypt, we always eager to build the capacity and to monitor and evaluate all the aspects that face the society. And analyze these issues facing the society. The most important survey that is important in CAPMAS is conducted by CAPMAS is HYECS survey. We can extract not only consumption pattern or expenditure pattern, but we also can extract some indicators such as poverty, monetary and non-monetary poverty, or multidimensional poverty, and so on. And there is a branched survey called Food Security Survey from HYECS, as we will see how can we collect the data from HYECS survey to achieve the survey of food security. We monitor from this survey the malnutrition among the children aged between 6 to 59 months and measure their weight and heights to monitor their malnutrition. I will speak briefly about the HYECS survey. The sample size is 26,000 households. This is our methodology. It was in 2015, 25,000 households. The sample is representative at the level of governorates and at the level of urban rural areas. The monitors in CAPMAS visit all the sample at the first half of the year and collect all the data about those households, the demographic data and consumption and expenditure data, of course. They collect the data about their gender, their age, their work status, and so on. And in the second half of the year, we keep track the same households that previously considered at the first half of the year. We revisit them again and collect another data about their expenditure and consumption to avoid seasonality in consumption or expenditure. When we visit the household at the first half of the year, we collect all the information about the households. So we take from them another sample for the children, for those households who have children aged between 6 to 59 months, to measure their weights and heights, and to calculate or monitor the malnutrition indicators, such as stunting, obesity, and so on. Let's see snapshot of results of HYECS 2017-18. This slide presents a percentage of poor during the period 1999 to 2018. We found that the percentage increases we found that the percentage of poor in 2017-18 is the highest compared to previous years. It reached to 32.5%. And here the percentage of the extreme poverty or food poverty from 1999 to 2017-18, we found that there is a variation. It increases at 28 and 29, and then decrease, and then increased again at 2017-18 to reach 6.2%. Snapshots of the food security indicators, and I want to focus that these indicators will be on hikes 2015, not 17 or 18, because we are still working on it. So it's not finished. We will find here the average calorie intake. The minimum daily per capita intake in Egypt is on average 2,400 calories per capita per day in Egypt. And 16% of this population don't meet their minimum daily energy intake. It's about 14.5 million people. The energy gap increased in Upper Egypt, affecting 70% in Sohag, in Qena, sorry, and about 61% of population in Sohag. And we found that 65% of the population suffering from calories deficiency are found in Upper Egypt, especially in upper rural Egypt. Dietary diversity is one of food security indicators also. We found that nationally 18.8% of the population are estimated to have poor dietary diversity, the majority in Upper Egypt, and followed by urban governorates. Nearly 50% of the population in Sohag and Asyut have poor food diets. Here, malnutrition among children. We found that stunting and obesity tend to be higher in urban areas. It reached 18.4% and 13.7% respectively, compared to 15.2 and 7.7 at rural areas. Also, we found a double burden on households. We found that 4.7%, about 5% of households have children who have stunted and obesity at the same household. Now I'm trying to link the data of the food security data and the data of HIKES survey to study the characteristic of those stunting children. We found that children with respect to overcrowding, children of overcrowded households are the most vulnerable to stunting. 18.8% of children who live in overcrowded household, the household have more than 2 individuals per room, suffer from stunting, while 15.4% of stunting children live in lower overcrowding households. The household stunting, according to Have a Sanitation, we found that 17% of children suffer from stunting, live in household, don't have a sanitation, while 50% do have a sanitation. According to monetary poverty also, monetary poverty is linked to child malnutrition, as we said before. 18.5% of children is poor households suffer from stunting, compared with 15.3% in children in non-poor households. I want to share our trial with you. We tried to, as I said before, we eager to evaluate and update our indicators. So we tried to make many trials to measure multidimensional poverty, and I'd like to share some of these indicators with you. Not the percentage or the numbers, but I'd like just to see the model. We choose these indicators, these dimensions and these indicators from HIKES survey also, like years of schooling, school attendance, health care access, health insurance, and standard of living, monetary poverty. We added here a dimension for monetary poverty. For monetary poverty and multi-sources of income as a dimensions, as indicators. And there are the weights, and we choose the nested weight. Just to just to be, we are eager to update and to calculate the SDGs indicators, especially the first one, multidimensional poverty, facing or eliminate poverty, eliminate all poverty in all facing that face of society. Shukran, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. This is very interesting and very important. I will just cruise on since we've gotten into Egypt. Okay? Yalla, it's becoming interesting now.
Do we go for questions now? Or?
If it's burning, we can, but I'd rather we...
Well, just a comment, not, I mean, because just a clarification about this 16% who don't have enough calories. So this is based on the most recent survey, right? 2015. Okay,
2015,
anyway, even
yes.
2015.
Yes.
So, and do you have a figure of before? How was the figure before that, before 2015?
Yes, we have, but I didn't share it now yet.
It was like more, less. I mean, just because actually, this is confirming to us that what we have in the FAO regarding this indicator is very outdated.
Okay, we can calculate it also to 2015, 2017, 18, and so on.
And what I recommend is that when we get to that, we sort of open a little bracket to give a little bit of the projection, because you're helping me getting into the segue of the next presentation. Anything burning that you want to say?
Yeah, I was just asking if there were any correlations on the food consumption patterns, security and the stunting prevalence. It would have been interesting also to see that, not just the poverty. In food consumption patterns, is there any correlation between that and the stunting levels in household?
Between food diversity and dietary diversity and something like that.
يعني أي element من the food security.
Yes.
Yeah. So you do have that analysis done?
Yes, we have an analysis now.
And can you present it, or you don't have it with you?
No, I don't have it now.
Very, very interesting, because that's I think it would also tap into
Dr. Hiba,
for the hikes, we have all these indicators at the household level, so we can link it with whatever indicator is. I mean, with the malnutrition, with the food diversity, with the caloric deficiencies. All of these are available, and we can link it. With each other, special dimension or whatever. It depends on the how much the researcher is interested. I think for the previous caloric deficiency, if I'm not wrong, it was 14 point something in 2013. But I'm not. It was around 14 something, but I'm not sure where. In 2013, and then in 2015 it increased to 16.9. But for 17 it's not calculated yet.
Let's do it later. I think what we're going to do is probably by the end of this session, maybe we will share a couple of emails from UNDP and IFPRI to connect on any other questions and follow up that you would like to do, because I think if this meeting is to succeed, it's to create interest and follow up, not just the interest, and then go home and be frustrated that you cannot do the analysis. And I think that what CAPMAS has been doing lately is extremely interesting, because there's a lot of questions, a lot of discussions going on, and there's a lot of demand for how to manipulate this data for further types of cross tabulations and analyses of different forms of, whether it's poverty or other forms of livelihoods. Okay, now we're getting into the real issue. Okay, we're getting into the SDG 1, SDG 2, poverty and nutrition. We at UNDP have not played with statistics in terms of collecting primary data. we have, with the Ministry of Planning, played with forecasting models. And according to our forecast model that we did, there will be 3 SDG elements or targets that will not be reached by 2030, and one of them is nutrition, the other one is gas emission, and the third one is, help me?
Water scarcity.
Water scarcity, okay? So this would be very interesting to see how, knowing that today, we can use accelerating mechanism by either looking at data, analyzing trends, and providing policy advice on how to actually touch on them. Interestingly enough, I'll give it to Sylvain, and he will tell you a little bit more about it, and we will move on. Thank you.
Right, okay. So thank you for coming, first of all, and thank you for all colleagues that have put that together. It's very stimulating. And now I have to look left and turn right. So this work and this presentation is not about big data. Yes, we use data and a lot of data points, and as you will see in a moment, but it's fairly traditional. The tool that has been used is quite advanced, but we cannot call that big data. But it goes in the same direction. We have more computing power, we have more data points, we have bigger database, better way to link them. So we should be using it. So yeah, we want to talk about where SDG 1 and 2 fit in the bigger picture. Because yes, there's 17 SDGs, as our colleague from IFPRI has mentioned, they are all interrelated. And we're dealing with a network of indicators, and we have to use system thinking to actually address them. So we have 15 other SDGs. We all are committed, according to various declarations, to meet as much of all the SDGs as possible, and SDG 1 and 2 are only one of them. And here I want to try to help us think how they fit in the big picture. Without forgetting that SDG 1, poverty, has many indicators, and SDG 2, hunger, has many indicators. So when we talk about hunger, malnourishment, we have to be very precise and look into the details. Only SDG 2 has 13 indicators. It's not, so it's not some, and they are all important and they are all different. There's no overlap. So we are thinking that policy see, I'll do that again. Right and left. Policy should improve the scores of Egypt on many issues, economic growth, etc. So when we do forecasting, we have to make a few assumptions. One assumption that's possible is that everything will stay the same. The policies of today will be the policies of tomorrow, and or the policies of today, which is to accelerate economic growth, will be the policy of tomorrow and will increase, and we will see where it takes us in 2030. When we looked at the Egyptian context, we thought, and again, it's not about poverty and hunger only, the whole context, women empowerment, the scores on governance, on environmental issues. So this came out as potential policy orientations, the one you see in this pentagon. We have in the middle something we call integrated push, where we say, okay, let's see if we put all these very good policy actions together, what will happen? So, and it's not the debate of today. The debate of today is more to see how it fits what SDG 1 and 2 are telling us. So to just signal that it's not a magic wand, there's a lot of computer coding behind that. I put out the interface that we use, and especially on indicator 2.1.1.a, which is malnourishment. So here you have the history in blue and the future in many colors, the many colors representing the different scenarios. So that's just a signal that there's a lot of data. I'm learning. And there's a lot of data behind it. So we look at many SDGs, and now I want to zoom on the two of importance today, SDG 1 and 2. So a lot of data points here, but to make things easy for people in the back, we use colors. Green is good, red is bad. And I just want to split it a little bit here. The numbers in the color cells are not so important. They are the deviation from what is the target at horizon 2030. So if it's very negative, it means we miss the target miserably. And if it's very, very high, it means we've done very well. So a few remarks here. Extreme poverty, as defined by the $1.9 a day, will go down in almost all scenarios. And some scenarios are better than others. Poverty, as defined by the 3.1 poverty line, will not be achieved. That is, we will not, according to all the scenarios we have looked at, and there are many others that we could have looked at, but the one we looked at will not reduce poverty itself sufficiently. So, and so it means that some people will not get full employment or stable employment, and that will not lift most families out of poverty. We can skip the other two indicators that are very important in all discussion we have about social protection and social priorities in budgetary spending. And we can look now at goal number 2, where you see a lot more red. And actually, the second line should be all red. Malnourishment is mostly not reached at horizon 2030, according to Citra, but not so. It's not missed by so much. On the other hand, malnutrition, and we're looking here at malnutrition for children, so I don't know, stunting and wasting, I don't know which one is which, are completely missed. So it means that there is and the numbers are actually not that high in percentage. We're talking about a single-digit percentage. But these children are suffering many things, cognitive development impairment, and all other things that maybe are not captured here, but there's a very good reason why these are included in the SDGs. So this is the future, the way we can predict it. No, we can debate, we can look at all the data sensitivity and probably criticize, but that's the picture, and that's fairly consistent. So the lessons for us is that there is some blind spots. That is, in Egypt, with the structure of the economy, the starting point in 2015, the structure of governance and food system is such that poverty, not extreme poverty, but poverty will not be reduced by that much, and malnutrition remains a very big problem. Here you have the other type of malnutrition, which is obesity, which is not represented, but which is also not performing very well. Now, if we look at other methods, and that's not the International Futures Model, that's something that the World Bank has done, that is called the SDGs diagnosis for Egypt, and that was done in many countries. So it's not big data, that it's fairly large multi-country regressions, and it just shows that if you're above the line, it means you're not performing as well as you should be at the level of development you are in Egypt, as measured by the gross national income. It means that something in the structure of the economy or the governance does not translate from dollars to good outcome. So just an indication, and that the trajectory you can guess, that is, for obesity on the right, we go slightly up and we converge towards the mean of the countries, and then on the right there is good progress towards back to the median line, but still we are still underperforming. That's another way of looking at things, and of course this is a multi-country regression in 2015 or 16, so it means it doesn't look at the future. It's not an iteration, it's not a simulation. However, what happened to countries that are slightly more developed than Egypt should reasonably be considered as an indication of what will happen to Egypt going forward, unless we craft very innovative policies. No, nothing to feel, nothing to worry. No, we have to be very worried, but the mitigation piece of information is that when we look at the world and all countries with the same kind of forecasting tools, many countries will not, and I don't know if we have a light, many countries will not reach this SDG 2 target here, right? I will see it. Okay. Many countries will not reach these targets here, so it doesn't matter what is measured. SDG 1 is doing better than SDG 2, and SDG 3 better than 2. So it may mean that there's something about SDG 2 that is not working very well for everybody, not only for Egypt. And that, I think, in the next presentation, we'll have an opportunity to see what could be the mechanics that are underlying these indicators that could be at play there. There's a lot of things. So, in summary, malnutrition and poverty, and to a lesser extent, undernourishment, are not responding well to various policy scenarios, most of which, by the way, are actually using economic development and social programs to make an impact. And on the effect of social program on malnutrition, there is incomplete evidence. And I'm saying that based on the scenario that was called social justice, which incorporates some assumptions on transfers of the richest quintile to the poorest quintile and other type of. But there is also an interesting study that was done by IFPRI on Takaful and Karama that also shows that, and it's not only in Egypt, there's many countries that the first thing people do when they get richer, they get out of poverty, is not necessarily to eat better, or it doesn't translate in positive outcome on their kids' nourishment immediately. So there might be other things to accompany that are needed. And so summary of the findings. Now, what could be going on? There is something that's not purely economic, that's not direct. And Egypt is, there's a misspelling. It's punching below its weight in malnutrition. As I explained, Egypt should be at a different place given its level of economic development. And the causes are unclear. Maybe the structure of the food system, that is the market that brings food to communities, is not. There's something maybe not correct there. Maybe some advocacy is not working for communities that should prioritize child nourishment in the early years. Maybe other things, and that's all open for discussion. And I think the colleagues that are specialized in this at UNICEF, at WFP, at FO, have many insights on this. But that's what we found, and that's quite interesting, because it popped out like this. It also means for us that there needs special policies. All the policies we have about governance, about women empowerment, that are very positive for many SDGs, they need to be complemented by something else. And that's for all of us to help design, especially the specialized institutions. No, we need more analysis, because the interplay between all this is not clear from simulation or not. And as usual, nowadays, when we have a problem we can't solve, we want an innovation, and big data could be one of them. Now, I have two more slides that have nothing to do with what I just said. This young person is not Egyptian from the dress, but I'm sure there's many people with similar occupation in agriculture or herding that have mobile phones. Oh, sure. And actually it's supporting by data. This is from the Ministry of ICT by way of CAPMAS at a recent presentation that was given by CAPMAS in Kuala Lumpur on big data. There is more cell phones in Egypt than people. And many of these cell phones are actually used for accessing internet. So there's a lot of data coming, and there's a lot of information that could be reaching these people. Thank you very much. This we don't need.
Thank you very much. I would like to go to the next presentation, and then we open it for a free flow discussion on a lot of the points that came out. Tfadal, please.
Okay. So left and right, pointing to the computer.
Okay. Dr. Ahmed Saadeddin with a double A. He's an economist.
No, this is right, but it's right in my name in English, but in Arabic it's Saadeddin.
Saadeddin, okay. Okay.
This is my passport.
He's an economist with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, which is FAO. He's with the regional office here, and he's going to give us a presentation on the food aspect of poverty.
Hello, everybody, and really thank you. I appreciate giving me this opportunity to take in this exciting seminar. Actually, just discovered that my presentation is pretty much linked to the one that we just looked at from CAPMAS, and in fact, there's one graph that's exactly the same, and it's not the same, it's not repeating, it's complementing, I would say. So, I mean, the outline is like, I would start just presenting the FAO framework for understanding, analyzing, and also monitoring food security and nutrition. We're not allowed now to say food security by itself, food security and nutrition all the time. And then I will illustrate this framework to give some examples on how food security and nutrition was doing in Egypt using the FAO official data. And I will conclude with just presenting some of the things that we're doing in Egypt with the Egyptian government on how to address some of the issues some of the problems that emerge in the topic. So, okay. Okay, so this is, probably many of you know this, and I'm not sure, but this is the FAO overall framework of food security. The FAO, let's say, recognize that there are 4 dimensions of food security and nutrition. The first one is the availability. So if food is not available, then for sure there's no food security. So it's about production, about trade, about imports and exports, about having the food available. And then the second dimension, accessibility, and this has to do with income, the ability of people to access food, but also, let's say, the location of food, the working of markets, and all of these components. And then the third one, use and utilization. This is about how food is consumed, and whether this is about nutrition actually, how food is consumed and whether it's delivering the right outcome. So people may access the food, may have it, may access it, but may use it differently, so will produce different outcomes. And then the fourth dimension was the stability, and it affects the 3 dimensions. So stability means the stability of the good use, the stability of access, so that income is also stable, markets are stable, and also the availability is stable. So we remember in 2008 that was a problem, for example. Food prices went up quite high. So here, of course, in the FAO database, official website, we have for each of these dimensions a list of indicators. And some of them are more important than the others, depending on the context, let's say. So it would demand a lot of time going through all, so I just picked few ones under each dimension, and I will go to present now how Egypt is doing in each of these indicators. So for availability, for example, I picked this one that's called average dietary energy supply adequacy, which kind of, let's say, measure how much, whether the food that's available in the country is enough to feed the population and provide, let's say, energy in a sufficient quantity. The second one, accessibility, I'm going to choose two indicators. I'm going to explain them later. So one of the prevalence of undernourishment, which is the FAO historical traditional indicator, and the new one that we are using now and we're relying more on it, which is it's called Food Insecurity Experience Scale. Then for stability also I have two indicators, and then probably I prefer to go to them one by one so that we can, once we see the figure, we can explain the. So that's the first one, that's measuring availability. So average dietary energy supply adequacy, and this is average for 3 years. It shows a trend. So, I mean, once this indicator is above 100, it means that the country has sufficient food to provide calories, energy, to have healthy and active life. So actually all the data from the 90s all over Egypt is doing very well on this. So it gives me an indication that probably the country doesn't have a big problem of availability. Stability indicators. Here I've used two indicators. I've selected two indicators. One is the cereal import dependency ratio. So see how much the country is relying on imports to supply cereals to the market, to the internal population, internal consumption. And this is the blue line here, and we see that actually Egypt is heavily dependent on imports, and this is well known. I mean, the domestic production of wheat, cereals, maize, rice, I mean, is like probably sufficient for 50 to 60%, while the rest comes from import. However, I mean, this is risky. However, the good news comes from the second indicator that, I mean, the country is able to purchase and to ensure the supply of these because the value of the food that's imported in the country is around less than half of the value of merchandise exports, which means that the country has good capacity to fund the import. So actually the problem comes actually when, when food imports, when the value of food import exceed the export of the country, and then there will be deficit in the balance of payment of the country. So, so we have a sort of problem in stability, but it's not also a big issue. Here, utilization, two indicators will be shown. One of them, the prevalence of anemia among women of reproductive age, and the other one of the prevalence of obesity. Have been mentioned in the presentation from Dr. Nesma. So here I show a trend. Sorry, these are the years. I'm sorry, but the last figure should be 2018, which means that we can trace back. So what the figure tells me, from one side, like the prevalence of anemia is improving, so it's declining, which is good news. However, it's still very high. This is the FAO official data. I don't know where they come from. I think so, yes. This is the source, but this is the... So it's still very high anyway. It's declining, but it's still very high. However, obesity is high, has been high, and it's increasing. And this is... Now, when we look at the accessibility dimension, here, this is the two... this graph shows the two, let's say, accessibility indicators. One is the lower line, the green line, is the prevalence of undernourishment, and actually this should correspond to what Dr. Nesma was saying when I made my comment. She was saying that 16% of Egypt's population don't have enough calorie. Our figure says it's 5%. I'm sure that number is the right one, because our number is based on a lot of assumption. Because we don't have access to microdata, so we use sometimes either assumptions or we use old surveys. So actually we are now dialoguing with CAPMAS to get access to the microdata in order to improve our estimate of this indicator. However, the figure that Dr. Nesma was telling, 16%, is more in line with the figure we have from the FIUS, which is the other indicator that FAO has developed recently to measure food and monitor food security based on direct data coming from households. So this is the FIUS questionnaire. So we ask I mean, we ask each selected household in a representative sample. I mean, these 8 questions, I just made them shorter for convenience, but they move from asking on worrisome, like are you worried about food, having enough food, to the extreme, the most extreme on the right. I mean, there's no food. You went the entire day without food, or you were hungry, or you didn't eat. You couldn't eat because of money. All of these questions come because of money. You didn't do this because of money, because of lack of money. And here, I mean, once we see someone who would say yes to the 8 questions, or 7 of them, that would be classified as severely food insecure. Why those who would say no to all of this that are food secure? And then there would be a spectrum, as we see in the figure. So if we come back to this, I mean, I will move to that. Here I just made a focus and zoom on the last 3 observations on which we have data from the 3 indicators. So we see that the prevalence of severe food insecurity is 10%, while those who are moderately food insecure is about is climbing from 20. Yeah, so overall actually is, if I go to this figure here, I see the fierce. Here, the red one tells me the share of severely food insecure, and the blue one is the moderately food insecure. So it's increasing in the last 3 years. I mean, this is the same figure that was shown by Dr. Nasma, and I just what I wanted to see to make the link. I mean, we see if you look at the last 3 observations in the poverty trend, normal poverty line with the fierce trend, so they're more or less the same. Even the last observation we have here, I think we have 36%, and here we have 32%. So they're very similar. We can really pretend, we can say that they are very much linked, poverty and the accessibility dimension of food security. What's this? Oh. Okay, here is another figure about, I also got it from CapMass, where the poor are concentrated, as Dr. Nasma was saying. So the poor, which means also people are facing serious problem accessing food and having complete food security, are concentrated in rural Arab. We have 25% of the population, but they include 40% of the poor of the country. And then they would sum to 52% of the local population is considered poor. Well, key messages so far. First of all, we have not trivial challenges to achieve SDG 1 and 2 by 2030. 30% are poor. Here it seems that Egypt to have a double burden. From one side, we have food security and poverty are worsening, and we have also the obesity, the health problem, so it's increasing. So this probably confirmed that it's not purely economic. And actually, I was looking at the figure from Dr. Nasma on stunting. So it's true that the poor have more stunting than the non-poor, but I couldn't see a big difference between the two. So I don't know whether it's significant or not. So of course this requires different approach, and here I would like just to mention some of the few things that we are doing with. FAO is collaborating, is helping the Egyptian government to now review the Sustainable Agricultural Development Strategy, and that's an opportunity for us to work in order to provide some support on how the agricultural sector should perform in order to respond to. Also, we are collaborating with we're doing for the Egyptian government the study with IFPRI on cluster-based rural development. Also, we are working on the review of the nutrition of the food security pillar in the Egypt Vision 2030. And many other things. I just would like to mention a few things on the first 2, because these were I know more things, and I think they're relevant for the question of poverty and food security. So, here, when it comes to agriculture, the FAO advocates sustainable and resource efficient agricultural practices that maximize output per unit of scarce inputs, such as water. So efficiency and sustainability at the farm level. However, the point is that if we want to generate employment, to increase rural incomes, to then, let's say, reduce poverty and eliminate food insecurity, so I think generating employment is essential. And here, I mean, we should go beyond agriculture. We should look at the food systems and how it can develop. So, so we are talking about efficient and inclusive food systems to create value, to add value, to generate more income, and also to generate employment. I mean, we know that food systems is, I mean, the agro-processing is one of the most labor-intensive activities in the economic activities. So why focus on food systems? I mean, this is the first justification. I mean, it can play an important role in the unlocking Egypt and many of the MENA countries, they have comparative advantages in fruits and vegetables. And I mean, actually, agro-food industry is essential to extend the potential of such crops, of such activities. So for example, here we have Egypt, agro-processing contributes to only 6% of the GDP, but 14% of the exports, which means it has potential for improvement. Also, agro-food systems, I mean, it doesn't require like big investment, so it's not very costly. With little capital, it can go, especially if the poor have access to the right credit. And here I move to the second one. I mean, why we're doing this, why we think that this work in cluster is important. So, first of all, it's very good that the government is recognizing this, and so it's considering clusters as one of the pillars for the strategies of 2030. And so here, I mean, there are 2 points. I mean, cluster effort can help. I mean, one of the problems in Egypt and many other MENA countries is that agro-food systems, I mean, they're scattered. They're mostly dominated by small-scale enterprises that cannot reach scale. So actually, cluster-based, I mean, models can help put them together and reach scale. And at the same time, can help also overcome many of the costs, many of the problems, the constraints, like transaction costs or financial costs, credit, and so on. And thank you. Did I take much time?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Question. The floor is open. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Let's. I'm going to take. Let's start with 3 questions at a time. I have Hiba, Dr. Layla, and yourself. Okay. Hiba, تفضلي.
My question is for Dr. Ahmed. Thank you for a very interesting presentation. My question is, you were talking about the different factors which affects food security in Egypt. And however, I can't get to the conclusion which of them would hinder Egypt from reaching its goal in achieving goal 1 and 2 or for concerning food security. Another question concerning one of the graphs, I guess the graph on accessibility. Can you show the graph, please? Yes.
The graph, I mean, let me, could you please open the presentation?
Is Joe still on?
Which slide? Accessibility.
Yeah, could you, I can, the one after, okay, let me then move here.
Yes, stability.
This one?
No.
Stability or? Stability, sorry, okay. Okay, please.
So why are we seeing 2 bumps in around 2004, 2006, and then around 2016 maybe? There are 2...
For the red, I mean the red or the blue one?
Both of them. Both of them went down specifically around this time.
2014?
Yes.
Well, I mean...
And here again.
Well, I mean, I think it has to do. I mean, the first one, as we say, the serial import dependency ratio is measure how much. I mean, what is the share of imports in total consumption, domestic consumption. So it has to do with the fluctuations on, like, for example, the country would import more when the domestic production is less because of climatic conditions, because of whatever, or sometimes also the value of imports affected by international prices. So I don't know exactly what happened, but this is the reasons why they may move. I mean, so on the other side, I mean, the value of imports, so it has to do also with the exports. So I mean, because this is the share of imports in total merchandise exports. So it's not only.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much to both the presenters. It's more an observation rather than a comment about how the improvement in economic standards does not necessarily lead to better food choices. So it seems clear that there is a need for greater awareness about what constitutes a better food choice. And what's the role of government and what is the role of the international donor agencies and development organizations in enhancing awareness about better nutrition? We lose a lot of time on the media, listen to the television and radio in Egypt, and it's a lot of nonsense being projected all the time, and nothing about what should constitute better nutrition in order to solve problems such as stunting and anemia, which are really serious issues and problems. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you for this, because this was what I was going to comment on, that we always look at, because we know that malnutrition is a multi-sectoral problem, and even when we look at food security, I was hoping to see something about utilization. So we always talk about accessibility, and that's very much related to poverty. But then we don't look at the other aspects that could be related to other dimensions like awareness, cultural practices, behaviors, social norms, gender dynamics. And this is one of the main problems that I think contribute to why we're not making a difference when it comes to malnutrition. It's a pity to see anemia. I mean, you mentioned that anemia is declining. I hate this, because I know that the figures, when you look at DHS, yes, it has declined, but I really have my doubts. And that's why I was hoping to also see the disparities, the emphasis on disparities in data, because when we mentioned I think it was the first presentation, it was looking at the poverty trends, and that the poverty map is changing, that we see more different trends in poverty, and it's not just the rural poverty now that we are concerned about. So the same applies to, again, malnutrition. And this is why, again, we really never see the complete link. We just look at bits and pieces, and it's only the tip of the iceberg. So utilization is important. That's why I think it's important to look deeper into consumption patterns. I know that looking at energy intake is important, but we don't have a problem only in energy. In fact, we have overconsumption of energy. If you look at obesity trends, and obesity is equal in both lower socioeconomic classes and higher socioeconomic classes, and it's again related to many problems. So I really think that we. Coming back, also your question, Clemens, on the data and using private sector data. We need to know why we need the data. We have access to so much data, but sometimes it's very exhausting, and we need to pick the battles, especially if you have security issues when it comes to private sector data and other kinds of data. But just some simple data that complements the bigger picture could make a hell of a difference for us. So I think that we need to know what we are really looking for and what change can make it, because we keep asking the same question: why aren't we improving malnutrition? And I don't think we're going to be improving this in the next 10 to 15 years if we keep looking at it again in silos, because it's still in silos. Thank you.
I'm just going to add and compliment one sentence that Alia was mentioning. First, I'm a nutritionist, so my interest in this is about nutrition and how can we make it better. And I see in it, and it's not really a question as more as it's like a comment, that you're always using calories. I think the moment you start forgetting about calories and look at nutrients or looking at food, that picture will change. Like, for example, for the availability, If you look at the milk and the dairy product from the FAO data, we don't have enough to satisfy the needs of the people. So I think you have to step away from calories and start to think about food and how this food, healthy food in particular, because that's part of the security. It's not only to have access to food, but to nutritious food. So once we make this shift, probably the picture will change. Thank you.
I think in the diversity, in the food diversity, which is the indicator that we used in CAPMAS, it may cover some of the issues that you raised, because actually we know that we know how households diversify their food from carbohydrates, from milk, from whatever, and this indicator of food diversity is very relevant to what you are mentioning. It complements the deficiency and the diversity. Both of them are very important to draw the right picture on food security. So I think in CAPMAS there is lots of course I'm very biased to CAPMAS data, but it is there is a wealth of information. It's not fully utilized, and we invite all of you to look at the questionnaire of HIKES and make full use of the data, the available data. Most of the indicators that you mentioned, the questionnaire, the eight questions, most of them can be derived from CAPMAS with the full, representative data. Of course, the sample is very large, and some of them are quantitative and use the perception of the households. It's not only perception. What do you think? Do you suffer? But there is actually their actual consumption and behavior.
I'm just going to give the floor to the panelists if they want to answer to any of the questions or the comments raised, and then I'll go for a second round of questions, if you please.
Well, I mean, okay, so just a few, let's say, few sentences. I mean, like, replying to the first question, what are the factors that are hindering Egypt from achieving? I mean, from the data, I see. I mean, we have serious utilization problem, as everyone has emphasized, but also accessibility problem also is a big challenge. I mean, so I mean, I know there's still a problem of stability and availability, and there would be every country with it. But I mean, the priority should be given to the other two dimensions. Yeah, I'm sure for the protein, I mean, I agree with you. I just actually used calories to kind of provoke, because here, generally in the region, food security with the many policymakers is still equivalent to self-sufficiency in wheat and bread, which is, I mean, this is an old-fashioned. So, and this has been revived after the 2008 food price crisis. I mean, actually, so because many countries, I mean, were afraid would face, and then they come back to this old paradigm of self-sufficiency or having a minimum, and this is kind of sacrificing a lot of resources to produce low-value products. So when it comes to, I mean, malnutrition, and so, I mean, I think addressing malnutrition cannot, I mean, is a multidisciplinary problem. So, like, for example, the FAO overview of food security and nutrition of this year is going to be launched soon, is on nutrition, is on obesity, stunting, is focused, and it's, I mean, we are partnering with WHO, with UNICEF, so we hope that it will make a contribution on that. I mean, just we are dialoguing, I know we're dialoguing with we're talking with CAPMAS to see how, whether either to kind of elaborate a little bit the questions to get the best results. As you say, I mean, the sample that comes from the FAO is about 2,000 people. Why CAPMAS have 30,000, I guess, and so that would improve for sure the results. And we are hoping for good results, for good outcomes of this. And thank you.
Just maybe a clarification on the food system as a semantic. It's important for employment, as you said, but from the other side, from the consumption point of view, that's also where we have to look for answers. Advocacy, fine, but I don't think if you know the lower middle class is looking for affordable food, I don't think the market provides that in Egypt, and there's probably things that need to be taken there. If somebody wants to combat anemia just from the readily available food supply, maybe it's just not there. So there are other things that can be done, and policies would work even more directly than advocacy, probably.
I have two questions.
Phenomenal pleasure, Meg. Were you a little bit late too?
I was pleased to hear.
I just went through your absolutely stunning study about education and food security from the side.
FAO?
Okay. Sorry. Could you repeat the question, please? I was. Sorry.
I was pleased to hear you mention a very curious sentence which says that you are reviewing the food security pillar in Egypt 2030.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a pillar for food security? There is none.
Actually, there is a draft.
I was in the group planning for 2030. We worked with the Ministry of Planning for a year and a half, and we barely put in a few nutrition-related items in the health axis, it's called. And no mention of nutrition was anywhere, nutrition as nutrition. So you said nutrition, so that's one question. The other question is, nutrition in Egypt is handled piecemeal. Not even the UN system is looking at it as a whole. There's no comprehensive. So I hope that at last, or at least, you're doing something in a total review with a comprehensive approach to nutrition. And another question is, you mentioned the new FIES, the Food Insecurity Indicator. If I remember right, it doesn't address children. It's adults, isn't it? Yes. So because everybody doesn't know it, it's a new indicator, and it must be. I mean, all what you presented does not include children. This is important to know. Then I did not hear any mention about the impact of environmental pollution, contamination, water and soil and food on food and nutrition security. In Africa, I work as African nutrition expert with the African Commission. We have done an extensive review of the progress made by African countries, including Egypt, in achieving the goals: food, nutrition security, sustainable agriculture. And Egypt scores very poorly in many nutrition and food security items. And actually, it was the score for Egypt in the last review, we haven't evaluated the new review, is below the minimum score. So I hope that things are picking up. I'm hearing a lot of good news in this session, especially the one working with the Ministry of Planning. But my question is that I'd like you to assure or to ensure that a comprehensive approach is used to nutrition, is applied in nutrition. Thank you.
My question is for Sylvian. You said something about the numbers for forecasting severe acute malnutrition.
The numbers were so intriguing for me. I noticed that like we are doing really, really bad. As far as I am aware, we have a problem in chronic malnutrition, not in, I'm not sure what the definition of severe acute malnutrition is including here, but as far as I'm aware, this is for like wasting and stuff like that. So would you mind to elaborate more on this point?
Can you hear me? Yeah. I have a very simple question for Dr. Nesma, actually. And maybe I have misunderstood or I didn't pay attention, but could you please tell me what is the baseline of poverty that you use? How many US dollars per day you calculated extreme poverty and poverty to get the numbers that you had? Thank you very much.
Do you have any more questions? The last question.
Okay, Nesma, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for coming. I always appreciate CAPMA's excellent work and our collaboration. So my question, since we also had a presentation on big data today, do you know what is CAPMA's vision or plans to use some of those new emerging technologies, let's say, going forward? And then for Sylvain, so you were talking about double burden of malnutrition. And so you're asking what are the causes, what are the drivers, etc. So we have done, all of us, together with Dr. Helber and others, quite a bit of research on this. And it's a lot of the usual things. It's multidimensional. It's about education of women. It's about breastfeeding. It's about clean water. It's about health services. But one of the things that we also find, in addition to food dietary diversity, it's about food subsidies. And that's something that's very specific to Egypt. I'm happy to chat more and also refer you to the respective book. But I also have a question. So you put up these projections, no? And we all know that, for example, tackling stunting takes improvements in all those dimensions. So I was just wondering if you could explain a little bit more what is behind the model. How do you actually project all these things 20 years ahead?
Okay, I will give the floor to Mr. FAO.
أحمد أحمد
سعد الدين على Mr. FAO.
Okay, so can I have? Oh, okay, I can. Oh, okay, I can just use this. Okay, I'm just. I mean, to where we were. I mean, just to answer, to clarify some of the comments that come from Dr. So I mean, actually, yeah, I mean, I'm not involved in the review of the nutrition strategy, but I know that we have received a request to support. And then, I mean, the strategy, I mean, the pillar, the vision is the government, work. So we just provide support. It doesn't mean that they will adopt our view. I mean, that they have their priorities, and then we know that there are different points of view on how nutrition and food security should be treated. I mean, we failed to convince many governments in the region that, I mean, the self-sufficiency is not very important. I mean, you can handle availability in many other cheaper, more efficient ones, but we failed as a FAO. So on the other side, I mean, FIAS, I mean, food insecurity experience scale, I mean, there are questions were asked to adults. I mean, I'm not sure whether they imply also the children, because usually the one who's asked is the head of the household. For sure, if the adult would lack food, would have implication for the children. But I mean, you are right. I mean, the questions are not asked to children. No, I mean, that's for sure. I mean, a very good point about this, the impact of pollution, land degradation, soil on nutrition. Actually, this could be the key word to reply the concern of Sylvain when he say that there's a problem in the food system itself. It's not delivering nutritious food. So the problem probably, even if you have money to buy food, you may not find the quality that you need in a substantial quantity. And well, I take vitamins regularly and minerals. Because here in Egypt, I don't know, I've been here for a year, and I had some health problems that my doctor couldn't pick by blood analysis. And the end, take these, and after a week I recovered. So the explanation from the doctor say that the pollution, probably you're not adapted to this level of pollution, and so your body needs some supplements from outside. You're not able to take enough vitamins and from the food you eat. So it probably means that there is some failures in the food system to deliver nutritious food.
Actually, in CAPMAS, we didn't calculate the poverty line as $2 per day for one person, but we calculated it. It depends on the households. Every household has its characteristics. So the household who lives in urban areas, not as the household who lives in rural areas, and the households that contains of 4 members, not as the households that contains of 2 or 1 members. So it differs from, and the ages also for every for every person in the household make a difference between this household and this household, and so on. So every household has their minimum basic needs. So we calculate the minimum basic needs for every household, and then just to compare if they meet the minimum daily energy, or the minimum energy or minimum needs or not, just like that. If their consumption exceeds the poverty line that we calculated, then they are not poor. And if the consumption is lower than the poverty line, then we consider it as poor. I hope that's really clear. For our vision, we started to build the capacity in CAPMAS for big data, and all the employees in CAPMAS started self studies, such as Coursera and many other courses, to take courses online and improve big data and Python and so on. So for me, for example, I started this. To do this, and I took a course in Coursera for Python, for data science, to improve my skills in Python and to improve my skills and to have a great knowledge. And I think all my colleagues in CAPMAS started to do this beside the capacity building of CAPMAS to study big data, and we have now a vision to go to big data. Thank you.
And on that topic, I think we have to acknowledge Reem, who was here, who actually presented a paper in Kuala Lumpur in August on that topic. So CAPMAS is very active in adopting these things. And some of my slides are actually from your paper, Reem. These are the same questions. I think there are 2 related questions we have on malnutrition. The definition is, I think it's the proportion of children that are below 2 and 3 standard deviation of the median. That's standard definition. No, don't be alerted by. Can you just show the slide with the colors? Don't be alerted by the red. It's very difficult to move from 3%, from 7% to the target, which will be 3.5%. And the other is 4.5, so the target will be 2.2%. This is the last mile. Yes, just okay. Just the next slide on the 2 or the one after, right? No, there were two questions. There were one question about why is it that Egypt is not known to do very badly on this. So why is it that it's red here? And I'm saying yes. When you're in the last mile of eliminating something, poverty, whatever it is, it's very difficult. So, and some child mortality is one of them. It's very difficult to move from 1.9 to, and developed countries are facing these problems, and they have reversals. So it's just technical. It's very okay. From a small percentage to even a smaller percentage, and that's very difficult. Just the next one. The next one. 4.5. According to the data, we are 4.5, so it needs to go to 2.5 in 2030, which is a very small number. And for this one, these two, we are looking at these two. So from 7 to 3.5, halving, and for 4.8 to...
Okay,
it would be 2.2. Then,
I couldn't understand the other slide. I mean, what the percentage is?
Then there was another question on that. Is what's in the model? Let me get back to you on that. No, the model is typically this model is made of many modules that are linked to each other. 12 modules: governance, economics, women empowerment, education. And they are basically crystallizing what the status of knowledge is about how variables are linked together. Now, it's made for the world. So we don't know if it's adapted always to Egypt, and that's part of the digging we do on the model to know. For example, there's another puzzling fact is about women empowerment. The recent trend is not according to what middle-income countries have experienced. Women are exiting the labor force, etc. So there are things we need to dig, and that's a very good question. What exactly is in the model? I forgot which question, maybe Ahmed's question. But all the things we're discussing today should inform exactly what goes in the model. You're talking about all the things that goes into eliminating stunting, and it takes a lot. So that answer the other question is that the last mile takes a lot of other things to happen at the same time. I hope I answered the question.
If I may dovetail on some of the questions that were asked and draw some main conclusions. First of all, this is not good news. Abadan. I mean, this is interesting work, but this is not good news, because the issue of malnutrition remains quite serious, and the solutions are not out there. But the more we dig into the problems and the interlinkages with other factors, the better chances we have to deal with it. Hence, I jump to the question of Dr. Leila on awareness, and I support what Sylvain said. It's not just about food, it's not just about productivity, it's also about consumption. And while we're sitting here having this very interesting conversation, we are all like-minded. We all understand this data, but we should probably be having this conversation with some marketing people, with some private sector people, because people eat what they are sold. I mean, there's a very big machinery of consumption that is where the advertising, the supply, the price, the cost, all encourage certain types of food. I would kill for a McDonald's right now, but it's the worst thing you can eat. The other thing that I gathered from this discussion is that yes, we do need more details, like Dr. Leila said. We need more details to sort of link the dots on some of these issues. And it just simply confirms that poverty, malnutrition are all multidimensional aspects, and you cannot address one without actually getting to the other. Now, what I want to explain a little bit more on what this is. This is a modeling tool for identifying accelerators on achieving the SDGs. And there were a number of scenarios that were tested. And if you look here, can I have the previous slide? Like this is the current path. This is the current path that Egypt is taking. Okay? And then this is the economic path. A little bit more focus and accent on economic growth will improve the situation by so much. Removing this, if we instead go on social justice, which is basic social services, which is transfer, cash transfers, which is cash for work, then the improvement will be so much. With the governance, it's more on the institutional aspect. More efficient government, more accountable, more better, faster access to services and transactions, then you would have this part. On women empowerment, which is the most important, which is the most interesting, was if more women join the labor force, coupled with family planning awareness, will actually decrease the growth in population, the population growth. It will increase unemployment for a while, but then improve it. But it will also decrease population growth and improve economic, and probably will have the greatest impact on malnutrition. Whereas none of the other scenarios will have any impact on malnutrition. This is what this model is about. It's really about forecasting and playing around with different policy options. Now, when you want to go into the more specifics, you have to drill down. This is just indicative at this stage. So you can't take it, you can only take it at face value, but it does confirm the interlinkages between certain emphasis having greater externalities than others. Basically, this is to answer your question. But the idea of taking this further is there. Will it translate into policies and into programs? Inshallah, ya Rab. This is, some of them are the last mile, and they take the more effort to convince, to fund, to implement, to prioritize. Because once a problem is below 10%, yalla, let's go to the one that's at 90%. And what I get from this discussion is that there's a clear question of how do we take all of this information, disaggregate it, and turn it into action, and then be able to monitor it to see how fast they can change and how they can change. You have something more to say.
This is just this model again. We need maybe to have more explanation on how it has been developed and what's included in there. Because if everything stays as is, the economic development, we know the growth now is like what? It increased from 2011 to 30, to now it's like 4.5%. So if the but how would it go back? This is 100, it's going with the severe malnutrition to be reduced 180% time. It's going worse 180% time. Why? Maybe we misunderstood it.
180% is the deviation from the target. That is, the target will be 3. The target will be 1. It's been set at 1, and I think that's not coming from. It's coming from the SDS 2016, and we will reach a reduction of 3, which is very good news. But still, 3 is much bigger than 1. That's where the 180% comes from. So it's not a worsening. It's by how much we miss the target. So it's but still, a target or target. We need to be committed to that.
Okay. If there there are no more questions. I would like to thank everyone for coming.
I just want to add one point. I think colleagues are asking how do we have better policies, how do we have... I think this is what you're doing today, is by discussing, by reflecting, we're creating the scope and the environment for actually having a critical mass of interest on this and other topics. So the answer is within you.
I want to thank everyone. I want to thank Ahmed. Thank you very much for an excellent, thank you very much. Nasma, thank you for coming. We're sorry that Dr. Naveen Kabash could not be with us. She was called in by the minister, so we have to go tell Ghada that we don't like that she would take her away from us. Sylvain, thank you very much. Okay. Okay. I just also want to thank Clemens and the team. Thank you very much. Thanks, Aya, who has been actually the motor behind working with IFRI from UNDP side. Thank you, Dr. Leila. Thank you, Dr. Yala. Inshallah, we'll see you soon again.